Okay, guys, let's start. So this is November 2014, question number 1, and the variant is 2. So which statement about the problem of scarcity is correct? And the right answer is D. Human nature will make the solution of scarcity impossible. And the reason is simply that human nature is basically of unlimited wants, and that unlimited wants and limited resources will always lead to scarcity, and that's why D is the right answer. So human nature is basically that unlimited wants will make scarcity always to be there. Okay. A firm is, so the second question, the firm is considering whether to buy a piece of capital equipment which will cost $2,000. It estimates that the equipment will last for 2 years. The alternative is to lend the money to a finance company at a compound rate of interest of 5%. So it's not a normal rate, it's a compound rate of interest of 5%. What is the minimum increase in revenue the firm must expect to make it worthwhile buying the equipment? So how do we do this? We first find out the two options and the opportunity cost. So for example, in this case, 2,000. Okay, in the first year, 2,000 times 5% is how much? 100. So we will add that to 2,000. So in the first year, end of first year, the value of this money would be 2,100. 100 interest plus 2,000. In the next year, it's going to be 2,100 times 5%. That will turn out to be, what's the value 2,100 times 5% is? 105. So I add that to 2100, it becomes 2,100 and 2,205. 2,205 would be the value here. Now, so this option, if you just keep it in the bank, it will give you 2,205. But if you are buying a capital equipment, then there is an opportunity cost, which means you will forego this much. So when would it be worthwhile to buy capital equipment? When the return is more than 2,205, more than or even equal to, but more than for sure, D is the right answer. If you get 2,206, this option will be worthwhile as compared to keeping it in a bank account where there's a compound interest. Okay, so the right answer would be D. Okay. In the third question, they say the diagram shows the production possibility curve XX of an economy that produces both consumer goods and capital goods. If the economy moves from point M to point N, right? Which diagram represents the most likely position of the PPC curve YY? So clearly, you are having less of capital goods, more of consumer goods, which means that, you know, when we have more of consumer goods and less of capital goods, there is a what we call less investment. And it's like more jam today versus more jam tomorrow. So if you decide to have more of consumer goods today, you would have higher standard of living today, but tomorrow you would have a lower standard of living. In other words, PPC will shift backward. And that's why B is the right answer, PPC will shift backward. Make sense? So lower investment or capital goods would mean lower economic growth in the future. The quality or quantity of factors of production goes down, PPC shifts backward. Consumer goods, so अभी आपने ज़्यादा consume की, right? You consume more consumer goods, but the impact of that would be less of both goods. You know, you need to have enough investment to have the PPC shift outward. Okay. Arfan and his brother Ben owns and runs a fishing business together. They have one boat, and on the days when they fish, they employ Cephas and Deepak. They sell the fish to the owner of a local shop. Which row correctly identifies the factors of production? Well, what's the land involved? The fish. Isn't that true? Land is any natural resource. What's the labor? These guys, Cephas and Deepak. What's the capital? The boat is the capital, and the enterprise is the brothers, the Arfan and the Ben brothers. So D is the right answer. Okay, the market price of a product rose from 8 to 10, and as a result, the market demand fell from 20,000 to 8,000. Makes sense. When the price goes up, the quantity demanded goes down. If I ask you what's the PED when the price goes from 10 to 8, what's the percentage change here? 25%. What's the percentage change here? It's 12 over 20,000 times 60%? 60? So 6, sorry? 12,000 over 20,000 is? Sorry? 60%, right? And what's the PED going to be? Greater than 1 for sure. Why? Because PED would be 60% over 25% will be greater than 1. But 2.4, for example. Okay, that's fine. But look at this. Consumer excess demand declined from 30 to 24. What is this 6 over 30 times 100? What's this going to be? 20%. 20% over 25%, the value would be PED less than 1. Isn't that true? 0.8. So, and Y key fell from 100 to 60, which means 60 minus 100 is 40. 40 over 100 is 40%. 40% over 25% is PED greater than 1. Isn't that true? Now, I'm finding too much information, but this will make our answers really easy. Consumer excess demand for the product was more elastic than the market demand. That's not true. Consumers' excess demand was less than 1. PED was less than 1, while the market demand was more than 1. So, A is wrong. Isn't that true? B says consumer excess percentage share of the market increase. So, we can find out percentage share is basically his share right now divided by total market share, which was 8,000. And what was it previously? It was 30 over 20,000. So clearly you can see this that this goes down by 6, but this goes down by 12,000. So clearly his market share, can somebody find 24 over 8,000 times 100 and 30 over 20,000 times 100? This is 0.3, 0.33 I think, and this is 0.05 if I'm not mistaken.
So 0.3.
That's 0.3. What's this one? 0.15. 0.15. Clearly 0.15 is the market share percent versus 0.3%. So consumer excess percentage share of the market has increased. So B is the right answer. Make sense? Are we good? Market share is simply your demand over total demand. Are we good with this? From here to here. Previously it was 30 over 20,000, now it's 24 over 8,000. At all? Anything? Everything? Should I explain again? Okay. Basically, first thing they said that, let's look at the answer choices first and then we can go back to the question. The first thing they said was this, that consumer excess demand for the product was more elastic than the market demand. And it's true it's not true. Why? Because market demand, key elasticity was 10 minus 8 over 8 times 100, which means 25% was the quantity price change, and quantity change was 8,000 minus 20,000 over 20,000, which is basically 60%. So if I find my PED would be 60% percentage change in quantity over 25%, which is percentage change in price. PED would be basically greater than 1. It came out to be 2.4. But consumer excess PED was 24 minus 30, which is 6 over 30 times 100, which is 20%, divided by percentage change in price, which is 25%. PED would be less than 1. So clearly this is wrong because they're saying excess demand was more elastic. Then the B says that consumer excess percentage share of the market increase. Market share is simply excess demand over total market demand. Okay, which is simply X की demand कितनी है? What is the excess demand? It's going to be 24 over market demand. What's market demand? It's basically 8,000. So this versus this, and it was moving from 0.15 to like 0.3.
So it's not a PED निकालने की जरूरत नहीं. पहले कुछ part and then.
I'm sorry, why?
PED की जरूरत नहीं.
इसके लिए तो नहीं थी. For A to prove A wrong.
उसके लिए थी, लेकिन ऐसे.
Yeah, but you need. How would you be able to solve it then? Unless you just.
पहले देखना तो पड़ेगा सर कि मांग क्या है. PED का तो पूछा ही नहीं उसने.
Oh, they're just asking, na? PED excess demand was more elastic.
वो उसके लिए proof करने के लिए.
Yes, I need to prove it, right? Otherwise, you'll be like, sir, why is A not right? And how would I tell you guys why is A not right? Unless I can't tell you by the numbers. Okay. A government wishes to impose a tax on a good so that the producer and the consumer pays. Very easy. If the if the government wants the producer to pay the good, then the PED must be greater than 1. Elastic. By the way, if they give you PED and PES and they say, then you need to remember the rule. If PED is greater than PES, who pays the tax? Producer. Whoever has a higher elasticity will be more powerful in this manner. If PED is less than PES, consumer pays the tax. If PED is equal to PES, the share is equal. The split is equal. Split equally. Okay. Similarly, if PED is equal to 0, consumer only pays the tax. While PED is infinity, producer only pays the tax because consumer has a completely elastic demand. So in this case, the right answer would be, if you want the consumer to not pay the tax, producer to pay the tax, A would be the right answer. Okay, but this is just to tell you, sometimes they give you both demand, supply, both together, and they may ask you who will pay the tax. Okay, moving on. The demand for a commodity has a unitary elasticity, which diagram shows the relationship between total expenditure and the commodity and its price. So unitary means PED is equal to 1, right? If PED is equal to 1, we know this, that the rule is this, that the diagram would be what we call demand curve, would be like a rectangular hyperbola, where we know this, that P naught times Q naught must be equal to P1 times Q1. So P naught times Q naught must be equal to P1 times Q1, and if such is the case, then the total revenue will be unchanged, or expenditure would be unchanged. So the right answer would be B, where no matter what the price, your expenditure is unchanged because your PED is equal to 1, which says this, that the consumer's expenditure to a change in price will remain unchanged. Make sense? So B is the right answer. Okay. The price of good X rises by 10%. As a result, the demand for substitute good Y rises by 20%. What is the cross elasticity? We know cross elasticity formula is percentage change in quantity, which is 20% positive over 10% positive, which is 2 positive. Substitute positive value, which makes sense. So the answer would be 2.
Sir, वैसे भी substitute बताया तो positive.
Yeah, but then this was the thing.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Substitute positive always, right? The diagram shows a supply curve for coffee in an economy. Now remember, this is supply curve. So normally, if there's a supply curve like this, we would see a situation where we would say that if there's a movement along the supply curve, it must be because the demand curve is shifting to the right. Makes sense? If demand curve is shifting to the right, then the right answer, because this is demand and supply for coffee, and if C would be the right answer. If T becomes expensive, this would mean if the substitute becomes expensive, demand for coffee would go up. Isn't that true? So, sorry, come again loudly. It's not a shift of the supply curve, it's a movement along the supply curve, which means it's a shift of the demand curve. How would you move along the supply curve? By shifting of the demand curve. And that's why we looked at not the cost factors, but we looked at the demand factor. Okay, and demand is increasing. Otherwise, if demand was decreasing, I would have said B is the right answer, but demand is increasing. Okay, so C for question number 9. Okay. Number 10. In the diagram, I want to explain an important concept here. In the diagram, OS1 and OS2 are two supply curves. As price increases, the elastic supply. Well, we know that if it's a linear supply curve, and if it comes from the origin, PES will always be equal to 1, but it will also be constant. This is the two things that you need to remember. It won't be not only equal to 1, but it will also be constant. But what if this is the supply curve? I give you this supply curve. By the way, इसका आंसर क्या होगा? The answer for this one is D, is constant along OS1 and OS2. But what if you have a supply curve like this? If it comes from the price axis, it has to be elastic. PES has to be greater than 1. But remember this, that not only PES will be greater than 1, but as price rises, PES falls. It won't be constant. PES won't be constant. It actually will fall. Mathematically, we showed this in class. You don't need to know it mathematically, but you need to remember this, that if it's an elastic curve, if it's a supply curve which is coming from the price axis, PES will always be greater than 1, and as price goes up, your PES will fall. If this was a, so I would have said decreases. Elastic supply decreases. Okay, but then I can't make a comparison between OS1 and OS2. But I'm saying the supply curve, if it's like this, it's going to be decreasing. Another question, substitution could be this one. What if the supply curve is coming from the quantity axis? And the answer would be, if it's a linear supply curve coming from the quantity axis, PES will be less than 1. But as P rises, PES rises. PES rises. And the formula is basically, remember, PES is equal to 1 over slope times P over Q. Now slope, if it's a linear curve, slope will be constant. What happens here is that Q is rising faster than P. In this curve, Q is rising faster than P, denominator goes faster than price, PES will fall. In this case, P is rising faster than change in Q, because it's an inelastic curve. So this will be changing faster than this, and that's why. Okay, so D is the right answer for this one. But remember these concepts for future questions. There are a lot of questions that come in different variants which would ask us this kind of concept. Okay. In which case will a given increase in the supply of a good cause the greatest fall in the price of the good? Now I want to show you this through diagram. So what if you have a situation like this? I'm going to make two situations. Okay, they're saying there's a increase in the supply of a good. So if I make a demand curve which is perfect, very inelastic, versus if I make let's make it perfectly inelastic, versus I make a demand curve which is like this. Now when my supply goes up, will this be a greatest increase in price? And the answer is yes, because when my supply curve shifts in a perfectly elastic scenario, there is no change in price, which means the more inelastic the good, the higher will be the change in price when the supply curve shifts to the left, or to the, in this case, increase in supply, right? So I'm actually decreasing supply, so there's a fall. I should be the other way around. Let me just do it the other way around. Like something like this. Supply curve is shifting to the right, so price will fall the greatest. Similarly, supply curve is shifting to the right. When the demand is elastic, price is not changing at all. So in other words, A is the right answer. When the demand for the good is perfectly inelastic, you will have the greatest fall in price. While when the demand is infinite, which is this case, there will be no change in price. Okay? So A would be the right answer.
Sir, how do we represent that?
When the good is inferior good, we can't represent it because an inferior good will also have a demand curve which is downward sloping. When the good PED is positive, PED can never be positive, so it doesn't really make sense as well. So they're like kind of confusing us with this option. Okay, are we good with A? Always remember, it's useful to make diagrams to visualize things, so उसमें काफी समझ आता है. And it's also good to look at extreme cases. If it's hold true for perfectly inelastic, it will hold true very inelastic good as well. Okay, this is a very popular exam question these days. It has two variations. Let me do this variation and let me do another variation that also come in different variants. This says the table shows the maximum price the consumer would be willing to pay for successive cans of fruit juices. The price of a can of fruit juice is $4, and having bought 3 cans, consumer decides to buy a 4th. Okay, so first, this is what you maximum price you're willing to pay, versus what you are actually paying is $4. So if you buy the first can, how much consumer surplus you get? 14 minus 4 is 10. 10 minus 4 is 6. 6 minus 4 is 2. And 4 minus 4 is 0. So if they are asking us, how does buying the fourth can affect the consumer surplus? And the answer is the fourth can has a 0 consumer surplus. So consumer surplus will remain unchanged. Make sense? Unchanged because they are asking us, what's the effect of buying the fourth? They're not asking us what's the total change, total consumer surplus. They're saying what's the change in consumer surplus. So change in consumer surplus because the fourth one, what you're willing to pay is exactly equal to what you actually pay. Consumer surplus is 0. But they can also ask you one more thing. This is something they asked in another question. They said, what's the total consumer surplus of buying 4 cans? If they ask you this, you'll be like 10 plus 6 plus 2 plus 0. Which means 18. Okay, this could be another variant to this kind of a question. 4 kili because what you're willing to pay is 4, what you actually pay is $4. This $4 is the price. That's fine. Is that fine? Which combination of changes would enable the price mechanism to allocate more efficiently in the monopoly market? Now, basically, we don't have a monopoly in our coursework, but we need to know monopoly from the perspective of the first chapter. You know, when a monopoly is there, monopoly is very powerful. And sovereignty basically means independence or powerful. Who is more powerful? Okay, so they're saying which combination of changes would enable the price mechanism to allocate resources more efficiently. If you want allocation of resources to be more efficient, you want the firm to be less powerful. So decrease. But in consumer to be more powerful, increase. Okay, because that would basically make the monopoly to not exploit consumers. Is that fine? So that's why C is the right answer. Okay. A firm wishes to build a factory extension. Permission is required from the government because the extension may increase. Basically, if they are building a factory extension and if the government is if they're asking for permission, maybe there's a possibility of any negative externality or external cost. Okay. Consumer sovereignty in the last MCQ, because if consumers become more powerful, then they are able to dictate their terms and the resources will be more efficient. Monopoly normally exploit consumers because they become too powerful. This can come, there is no problem in this kind of thing, but this is no longer there. This is cost benefit and all that. This is no longer in a syllabus, but that could come. I'll skip this question. Which one? Yeah, so I mean they can test our knowledge, but in our case, like basic definitions and everything is still there for our knowledge. Okay, what can be provided only as a public good? C. Street lighting is a pure public good because it's both non-rival and non-excludable. Road use, the reason why is because of tolls that you can do, or it can be what we call excludable. Also, it can become rival when it becomes crowded, right? TV broadcasting is also previously a kind of a public good, but now because of cable television, it's become a private good. Security services definitely a private good. You buy security services and all that. Okay, this is a good question. It says the diagram shows the demand for and supply of foreign-made mobile cell phones. Okay, the initial position is X. Importers increased the supply, so supply curve shifts to the right of the phone, and there was an increase in demand, so demand also rose. Okay, the government considered whether to protect domestic produced manufacturers with a limit on imports, which would keep the supply at initial quantity. So the government is doing this. Let me choose another color. The government is trying to do this. They're trying to sort of restrict supply here, like a quota of sorts. So restrict supply at this one. Let's call this S star. Okay. Now, as a result of this, how would the price change between the new equilibrium without the limit on import, which is basically this, to and the equilibrium with limit on imports. And this demand is the same. New supply is S star, which means G. We move from G to like E. So we move here where S1 and D1 is meeting, and now with new supply curve like this one, the new price will equilibrium would be here. So answer would be from G to E. Got it? Yep. The government imposes the maximum price of P2. The maximum price is above equilibrium. Will it be effective? And the answer is no. The maximum price has to be below equilibrium in order to be effective, and that's why what will be the position after this action? A. And equilibrium with price P1 and quantity Q1, because this will be ineffective maximum price. What is an effect on a country of free trade? Free trade would mean greater efficiency in the resource use, or we can specialize in, and comparative advantage can be exploited, and that could result in efficiency to rise. Diversity has to be greater specialization rather than diversification. It looks like a right answer, but it's actually specialization rather than diversification. What is meant by dumping? Dumping means selling of goods below the cost of production. So A is the right answer. Selling products in a foreign market at a price below cost, which is basically sometimes illegal, because you are exploiting the producers of other country by selling it below cost. Make loss in the short term to make advantage in long run. Predatory pricing, exactly. That would be what it would. Okay. As a result of trade agreements, toys produced in Africa can be supplied to European market. Okay, these toys are much cheaper, so the price is lower than similar toys produced in Europe, but are not of such good quality. So the quality is also low. Okay, what will happen in Europe to expenditure on toys? Should they decrease, increase, or uncertain? Expenditure. Uncertain, because at one point the price is going down, which is amazing news, but the quality is not so good as well. So we don't know whether the consumer will actually buy more of it. The revenue or expenditure will be more or less. We don't know that. Employment can go up. Employment in European toys companies. Employment can basically decrease if people are buying a lot more. But if people are not buying a lot more, employment would not decrease. So again, uncertain for sure for this one. Okay. So D is the right answer, but let's look at what about imports from Africa. Well, imports from Africa will definitely go up because the price is cheaper. So there will be some people who definitely will probably buy more, but whether the overall expenditure or revenue will go up is uncertain. So imports will definitely go up. It can't decrease, it can't be uncertain, it should increase. So D is the best answer. Is that fine? Is this okay? Which international transaction is correctly matched to the part of the balance of payment account in which it is recorded? Well, we know D, which is the receipt of interest on loans to foreign companies, is basically income, and that comes in the income section of the current account. So that's the right answer. Let's look at why others are wrong. Purchase of shares in foreign bank comes in the financial account. What part of the financial account? The portfolio investment of the financial account. Portfolio investment. So this is wrong. Provision of banking services. Services come in X minus M of services. In other words, current account services section or invisible trade. The outflow of funds from national reserves comes under reserves and not in the balancing item. Balancing is more of an accounting entry. Okay, so even this is wrong. Which one? Net income flows is basically short-term monetary flow. So it won't come there. Okay, so D is the right answer. The diagram shows the annual average labor productivity growth for 3 groups of countries during 2 time periods. Okay, so this dark region is your Latin America, East Asia, and high income countries. Okay, for agriculture. So they gave you for 2 sectors, they gave you the growth rate. So the way I'm going to read this is that previously the growth rate was like positive, almost positive 2%. went to from 2% to like 3 point something. So it went up by almost 1 point something percent. Okay, the change is 1 point something. Okay, now they're saying which activity in which country group achieved the greatest improvement in its labor productivity. And clearly, this is going down, this is going down. I think it's either this or this. And the best answer would be industry, may Latin America, because it was -1. From -1, it went to +2, which means a change of +3. So industry in Latin America. Okay, so D is the right answer. Okay, diagram shows the diagram which shows part of the process that causes the aggregate demand curve to slope downward. Agriculture in Latin America. I told you, right? In Latin America, the change is going to be hardly 1 or more than 1, but not 3. 3 is bigger than 1. The diagram which shows part of the process that causes aggregate demand curves to slope downward to the right is incomplete. Which words correctly complete the gap? Now, we know that AD curve is downward sloping. Now, quickly, if I could explain this, this is when the price level goes up. This is what they're saying. The price level is going up from P0 to P1. So, price level goes up. We know the GDP would fall, but when the price level goes up, what happens to your level of consumption? Why? Because the purchasing power is going down, right? You're purchasing, because things are becoming expensive, the level of consumption should fall. This is 3, right? So fall, fall, fall. The real value of savings should also fall because your savings will lose value because now inflation is happening. So falls, falls. Okay? But what happens to interest rate is an important thing to remember. Now, the logic behind interest rate is this, that when the price level goes up, your purchasing power is going down. Okay? The money that you have in your hand, will it buy you the same amount of goods? What would you do? You would want to borrow money. You would want to borrow money or you would want to demand more money because you want to buy the same amount of goods. In demanding more money, you would want to sort of borrow and suddenly the rate of interest will go up because the demand for borrowing will go up. People would want to borrow money in order to come back to the same level. So rate of interest will also go up. Got it? So that's why the rate of interest rises, the real value of savings falls, and the level of consumption falls. So 24 is C. Okay. The graph shows the rate of inflation in a country in a 5-year period. What can be concluded from the graph? Now, the first thing I want to sort of tell you this is this, that rate of inflation, when it becomes negative here, then this means that deflation is happening. And deflation basically means the prices are actually going down rather than going up. Okay? But the rest of the period, whenever the inflation rate is positive, which means prices are rising, but slowly or at a faster rate, but prices are rising. So let's look at each option choices and see whether they're right or wrong. The price level fell during 2 years. Price level fell actually only during 1 year. This is pura ek hi saal hai, so this can't be true. The price level was the highest during year 4. Well, year 5 May the prices were also rising, so we can't really say that. The value of money fell for 5 years. No, there was this time here where actually the value of money went up. Why? Because what's the formula for value of money? Value of money is equal to 1 over price level. When the price level goes down, which is happening in the negative zone, the value of money was going up. So this is also not true. The value of money rose in 1 year, and that's true because this year the value of money actually rose when the price level went down. Okay? So D is the right answer. Make sense? What might explain an increase in the volume of countries' imports? Volume and A would be the right answer. Why? Because appreciation of the exchange rate results in exports to become expensive, imports to become cheaper. When imports become cheaper, quantity of imports will go up. Because they're saying volume and not value, Elasticity doesn't matter. If they said "Ki value," then I would have said I want to know more about elasticity. But in this case, I'm just going to say price goes down, quantity goes up. So your quantity will definitely go up. Make sense? So A is the right answer. What is most likely consequence of an increase in country's balance of payment deficit? So consequence, guys, is an important thing. Sometimes what happens is we end up looking at causes rather than consequences. If there's a deficit, X minus M goes down or balance of payment goes down, which means that there is basically more outflows of money happening, right? Will there be an increase in the value of the currency? No, there will be a fall in the value. Why? Because a supply curve, if this is my demand and supply of currency, supply curve will shift to the right. So exchange rate will actually go from E0 to E1. So this can't be true. And increase the level of income? No, level of income may fall because X minus M may fall. And a reduction in the quantity of money within the country? Yes, because there's an outflow of money that will happen. A reduction in unemployment? No, an increase in unemployment would happen. So C is the best answer. Okay, money will flow out because there is more of deficit happening. So that's why C would be the right answer. Why? Quantity because the money is flowing out. Quantity, not the quality. Which economic change might contribute to both cost push and demand pull? A would be the right answer. We know this. Why? Because if the exchange rate goes down, exports become cheaper, imports become expensive, X minus M goes up, and demand pull inflation would happen.
Imported inflation.
Shabash. And also because, let me complete this, because imports are becoming expensive, if cost of raw material imported like oil may become expensive, and that will mean AS curve will shift to the left, and that will cause the supply curve cost push inflation. Does that make sense? So that's why the right answer would be A, a fall in the exchange rate. Okay, number 29. The diagram shows the market for Japanese yen. Supply curve is shifting backward. If the supply curve is shifting backward, supply of yen is shifting from S1 to S2. Remember this, that if this is happening, this means outflow of money has gone down. Probably less of imports are happening, or less people are investing abroad, or whatever reason, supply curve shifts backward. Make sense? So best answer would be C, a reduction in the value of foreign goods imported into Japan. If Japan is importing less because it's demand and supply of Japanese yen, if Japan is importing less, then the supply curve will shift backward. Make sense? So C is the right answer. To reduce the deficit on the current account of the balance of payment, a government imposes a limit on the foreign exchange its people and firm can purchase. So they're reducing a deficit on the current account of the balance of payment. The government imposes a limit. Limit means they are putting what we call exchange controls. Now, if people want to buy foreign goods, they can't do that because the goods, they don't have the money to buy the foreign goods. Let's say if I want to buy a US good, I need dollars. I won't be able to get the dollars because the government has controlled that supply, which means people would end up buying more of domestic goods. And that's why the right answer would be why might this increase the country's inflation? Because the firm may have to purchase more expensive domestic raw materials, and therefore the cost push inflation could happen. Make sense? So A would be the right answer here, because now you will have to sort of buy the more expensive domestic goods rather than cheaper imported substitutes. Okay, so 30 would be A.
So, can you explain 27 again?
Yeah, that's one.